On today's episode, I'll be talking about the epic 90s western Tombstone.
If you're looking for a man with no plans or programs, and he always leaves a chance to hold hands for romance, or you're looking for the Luke with an old man or cold hands, a creature of the night heads for his spotlight, I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Review. A method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews.
All right, everyone. Welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews, covering one unsystematically chosen topic at a time. If you like listening to a guy talk about arbitrarily chosen subjects in weekly episodes, then look no further. To keep up with the newest content, you can find Brandon at Random Reviews on most major video and audio platforms, as well as all popular social media sites. If you enjoy this, please like and subscribe. I use views as a primitive form of liquid pain medication to relieve my chronic headaches. So, as I mentioned, today's movie is Tombstone, released on December 25th, 1993. I feel like that date is significant in some way, but I don't really recall why. Runtime 130 minutes. This movie is rated R by the Motion Picture Association of America. Budget $25 million. Directed by George P. Cosmatos. Writers Kevin Hare. Let's go with one of those two. For the score, we have composer Bruce Broughton. And for the cast, we have Kurt Russell, who plays Wyatt Earp. He was also in The Thing, previously covered on this podcast. Love The Thing. Great John Carpenter movie set in Antarctica. It's at this scientific research facility where this monster is unleashed that takes on the form of the different humans that are there. And it's very well done. It's awesome. I fucking love it. Escape from New York was another one that Kurt Russell was in. Really enjoy that movie. He's only got one eye in that movie, which I find personally appealing. And then he was also in Big Trouble in Little China, which is one I need to go back and rewatch because I haven't seen it in a really long time. Then we have the late, great Val Kilmer, who plays Doc Holliday. Of course, he was in Batman Forever, which I also covered previously on this podcast. He was actually a really great Batman, but Batman Forever is such a disappointingly bad Batman movie that people often forget that he was actually good. I also love him in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is an underrated gem with Robert Downey Jr. I intend to cover it on this podcast eventually. I just haven't quite gotten there yet. He was also Iceman in Top Gun, a classic. Love Top Gun from the 80s. Fantastic. And the other great movie that is often forgotten, I feel like, is Top Secret. He is great in that movie. The comedy is fantastic. I really fucking love Top Secret. Not one I would probably ever cover on this podcast because honestly, it's a little too visual and it's a comedy, which I have mentioned before, I generally avoid covering because it's basically too much explaining of jokes and it just kind of ruins it. Next up, we have Sam Elliott, who plays Virgil Earp, and he was in Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. Pretty great movie. I really enjoyed it. It's a little ridiculous and over the top, but it's enjoyable if you can respect that kind of movie. He was in The Big Lebowski. He was actually more of the narrator guy. He appears on screen, but he's not really a character in the movie per se. And he was also in The Ranch, which is, in my opinion, a dog shit laugh track sitcom that is not particularly good. And I guess a lot of people like that kind of thing. I'm not a big fan. Moving on to another late great actor in Bill Paxton, who plays Morgan Earp in this movie. And he was also in Twister, which is a great 90s movie about tornadoes. He was in Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks, and I think, was Kevin Bacon the other astronaut? I think probably. And then, of course, he was in Aliens. He also had a bit part in The Terminator. Then, of course, we have Powers Booth, who plays Curly Bill Brocious, and he was in the movie Sudden Death with Jean-Claude Van Damme. there is a deleted scene from Parks and Rec where Chris Pratt's character, Andy Dwyer, sings a song outlining the entire movie Sudden Death, which is about a it's about an attempted terrorist attack at the Stanley Cup Finals. So it's a hockey game, and it's just a ridiculous movie, but it's a great 90s action flick, just a mindless action flick, honestly. Nothing crazy to write home about, it's just solid. And Powers Booth was also in Sin City, and he's kind of forgotten in that movie because there are a lot of actors in that movie chewing up the scenery, and it's fucking great. I've covered it, I think, on the first season of this podcast when I was still just audio. And then we have Michael Biehn, who plays Johnny Ringo, and he was in The Terminator. He often is not credited as giving such a great performance in The Terminator because there is so much else in that movie that people are thinking about when they watch it that he really doesn't get a lot of credit for really being great in that movie, honestly. Like, he really plays it very well. His performance is great. I fucking love him in that movie. But because there's so much more to talk about in that movie, it's just completely overshadowed. He also had a pretty small role in The Rock, and honestly, like, that is a forgettable role of his. It was in the mid 90s. It was kind of after Michael Bihn's heyday. He's still good in it. It's just he doesn't have as big of a part. And he was also in Aliens, which is a solid sequel movie. And I also intend to cover Alien pretty soon on this podcast. So, anyway, there are a lot more as far as notable names in this cast, including people who were relative unknowns at the time of this movie being shot. People like Billy Bob Thornton and Thomas Hayden Church. Then for casting notes, of course, we have Kevin Costner was the first choice to play Wyatt Earp, but he turned it down in favor of his own cable miniseries about Earp, which eventually became the theatrical film Wyatt Earp, which came out in 1994. Both Costner and his producing partner Jim Wilson confirmed that their project would not interfere with Tombstone, but screenwriter Kevin Jarre was not confident about this as his Dracula script had already been shelved after Dracula 1992 was greenlit. Then, of course, Tombstone did indeed have difficulty securing talent from Costner's agency CAA after his Earp project was officially announced. Wilson admitted there's no race, but because of the asinine mentality in this town, they won't let two pictures about Earp go forward. If I were a gambling man, I'd bet Tombstone doesn't go ahead. Ultimately, Tombstone was released 6 months before Wyatt Earp and was a critical and commercial success, whereas Wyatt Earp was a failure. Big shocker. So, Robert Mitchum was signed on to star as Old Man Clanton. Prior to principal photography, he fell from his horse and injured his back, forcing him to quit the part. Instead, Mitchum provides the narration at the beginning and end of the film. Willem Dafoe was actually the original choice to play Doc Holliday, but Buena Vista refused to distribute the film if he was cast due to Dafoe's role in the controversial The Last Temptation of Christ from 1988. The longtime veteran Western actor Glenn Ford had originally signed on as Marshall White, however, poor health forced him to withdraw, and the role went to Harry Carey Jr., who was originally cast as a wagon master. For the plot synopsis, a successful lawman's plans to retire anonymously in Tombstone, Arizona, are disrupted by the kind of outlaws that he was famous for eliminating. Tagline: every town has a story, Tombstone has a legend. Pretty fucking solid. Kind of a multifaceted meaning there. I really like that one, actually. Alright, guys, let's just dive right into this motherfucking plot. But first, let me ask, why the hell is the Hollywood Pictures logo a fucking sphinx? Couldn't you just use the Hollywood sign that is already there? It's a pretty obvious on the nose choice, but it would be better than a sphinx. It's not Egyptian Pictures, you know what I mean? This movie starts off with voiceover narration by Robert Mitchum and a bunch of old-style footage of settlers on horseback that is even sped up unnaturally like old-timey films. The narrator explains that in 1879, a while after the Civil War, There was an economic boom in the US that spurred westward expansion. He explains that people of all kinds, including farmers, ranchers, prospectors, killers, and thieves, began migrating toward that direction in search of prosperity, and yeah, that seems to cover every type of person pretty much. It is noted that cattle drivers were turning cow towns into armed camps, and that these settlements had higher murder rates than that of major modern US cities. Wyatt Earp is the legendary lawman that was known during these times, and he had decided to retire and settle down with his family. It goes on to explain that Wyatt Earp's friend Doc Holliday is also taking a break at this time as he has tuberculosis that he's hoping this relaxing time will help him recover from. The narrator goes on to explain that silver was actually discovered in Arizona at this time, and the settlement of Tombstone became queen of the boom towns as a result. But the other unintended results of all of these things happening is that it drew a band of about 100 outlaws exiled from Texas who would wear red sashes and were known as the Cowboys. The Cowboys are considered one of the earliest forms of organized crime in America. Finally, the old timey looking footage wraps up as that dude from the end of the Great Train Robbery fires his gun at the camera. Fun little tidbit there. The Great Train Robbery was an early short film that was popular at the advent of motion pictures. It came out in 1903, I believe. Many people had seen photographs at this point, but very few had seen video footage. So when the man fired the gun toward the camera at the end of the film, legend says that many people seeing it for the first time actually panicked because they thought a real man was pointing a gun at them. Anywho, we cut to this impending raid of a Mexican wedding by the aforementioned group of outlaws, the Cowboys, who show up right after the ceremony finishes. The leader of the Cowboys, Curly Bill Brocious, played by Powers Booth, accuses the people there of having killed two of the people in his group, and shooting ensues as the wedding guests flee helplessly. The gang unloads their weapons on the terrified guests, including women and children, until the gunfire subsides, and he tells a Spanish speaking member of the gang to order the groom to get on his knees. This is Curly talking. But the groom decides that he's going to be a tough guy and just not do that right away. And the man translating what the Mexicans are saying is actually doing a terrible job. And a member of the Cowboys named Johnny Ringo, played by Michael Biehn, calls him on it. The groom eventually tells Curly Bill to go to hell in English, and Bill says, "You first," and Bill promptly shoots him. Then the Cowboys all sit down to eat the wedding feast. Basically, this whole scene really just wants to hammer home the notion that the Cowboys are legitimately bad people and they really hold nothing sacred. I mean, this is a wedding, it's supposed to be this nice event, and they just do this at it. So you can just kind of tell that they're horrible, awful people. So it cuts to Wyatt Earp, played by Kurt Russell, who is getting off a train and kind of letting his eyes dart around the platform. He quickly intervenes with a man who is abusing and whipping an unruly horse and hits the man with the whip to show him how much it hurts and how little the man is actually doing to remedy the situation. As the man scurries away and leaves the horse with Wyatt, two U.S. Marshals approach Wyatt and introduce themselves. Wyatt quickly shuts them down and asserts that he is retired and he has zero interest in joining them at all. And that's basically what this movie is, just a calm little tale of an Old West lawman's early retirement and his uneventful life after being a U.S. Marshal. Right? Right? Wyatt's brothers Morgan and Virgil greet him and reintroduce him to their wives Allie and Louisa. And I'm not going to tell you whose wife is who, because I promise you they have zero relevance to the plot on that level. Virgil and Morgan Earp are played by Sam Elliott and Bill Paxton, respectively. Then Wyatt's lady, Maddie, I want to be clear that she is not his wife, appears after having apparently been looking at stores in town, and he reintroduces her to them all. She explains that she couldn't find something called laudanum at any of the stores that she looked in. Apparently, laudanum is an opium tincture that contains dissolved opium from the opium poppy mixed with alcohol. Historically, it was widely used for pain relief and cough suppression, but is now recognized as a highly addictive narcotic. And by the way, a tincture is a concentrated liquid extract of herbs or other plant materials, typically made by soaking them in alcohol or another solvent. It's pretty clear from her body language that Maddie is in pain. I also feel compelled to mention that I can't wrap my head around why we clearly saw Wyatt getting off this train without her, but she supposedly arrived with him. And she somehow, in this amount of time, has managed to check multiple Tucson area stores for laudanum in like 3 minutes as Wyatt was walking around the train platform. Sorry, I don't usually notice shit like this, and I don't like to do the CinemaSin things and point out stuff like this that doesn't really matter, but I just noticed it here because it was confusing as fuck to me. So the three couples look at each other in a mirror at the train and pose for a moment to look at themselves. One of these wives offers Maddie some laudanum that she has in her purse, and Maddie mentions that she just gets headaches sometimes, and I'm sure that's not foreshadowing or nothing. I reckon it's just that sometimes things happen in stories. Ain't nothing to worry about or get bothered by, you know what I mean? It cuts to Doc Holliday playing cards with two men at a saloon, and he shows his wisecracking personality as he manages to get the two men all riled up something fierce before winning the game. One of the two men who'd expected to win tells Doc to get out. As tensions rise, the man goes for his gun, but Doc shows how quick of a draw he has, despite his clearly advanced illness. So anyway, the Earps start to head to what I guess is Tombstone, Arizona. The score of this movie is a fucking masterpiece, by the way. Very fitting and epic in every way. Wyatt is greeted in town by a man named Behan, who of course knows Wyatt from his tremendous reputation, but he clarifies to Behan that he is no longer a lawman and he doesn't even carry a gun anymore. Behan boasts pretty aggressively to Wyatt about what a big fucking deal he is, how he's the county sheriff and whatnot, and he's on the fire brigade, and he's a tax collector and a bunch of other shit. Then Behan makes an offer to Wyatt to find him a place to live in town, and Wyatt really can't pass up the offer. Shortly after this interaction, the Earp boys run into Marshal Fred White, who sets the record straight and says that Behan is not the law around there, and the town is really controlled by the Cowboys gang. Fred points out that there are three men over by the saloon who are cowboys. He mentions that they all wear red sashes, which I should tell you was not a real historical thing and was just used to help the audience tell good guys from bad guys. Almost immediately, Wyatt leaves his brothers and Fred to go over to the saloon. He introduces himself to the owner of the saloon and he buys a cigar, and the owner doesn't really believe he's actually Wyatt Earp, but, it is what it is. An increasingly irritated and aggressive man named Johnny is playing cards nearby and catches Wyatt's attention as he lights his cigar, and Johnny gets more hostile with the people he's playing. Johnny is played by a then unknown Billy Bob Thornton. I want to say this was before he was even in Sling Blade, which is crazy. Wyatt makes a comment to the owner that it does seem pretty dead in the establishment considering it's such a nice place. The owner motions to the hostile Johnny and explains that he just came in there one day and was intimidating the guests with his gun and managed to chase out all of the high class players that used to come there, and now no one but the lowlifes come in. Wyatt asks the owner why he doesn't just kick Johnny out, and the owner alludes to the notion that it's not really an option for him, but he doesn't really even say that. It's just implied that he's probably too intimidated to cross Johnny because he's connected with the Cowboys, I think, is the implication. Wyatt walks over to Johnny and he's being even more aggressive and loud while all of the men at the table playing with him stay in scared silence. As Wyatt approaches Johnny, he asks Wyatt what he wants, and Wyatt puffs his cigar and tells Johnny that he's sitting in his chair. Johnny tells Wyatt he talks a lot for a guy who doesn't go healed, which means he doesn't carry a weapon. I had to Google that, guys. Trust me, I had no fucking idea what that really meant. Wyatt calmly tells him that it wouldn't take a gun to get the best of a knob like him, which of course really gets Johnny pissed off. Johnny stands up out of his chair and says, "I'm real scared," facetiously, and Wyatt doubles down and tells him that he can see he really is scared, and Johnny reaches for his gun. Wyatt angrily tells him to go ahead and pull his gun, kind of like a fuck around and find out kind of threat, telling him to do it and see what the fuck happens. Johnny says, "Now listen, mister, I'm getting real tired of your..." And Wyatt cuts him off by slapping him across the face and telling him to pull out his fucking gun if that's what he wants to do. He slaps him multiple more times across the face until Johnny's lips have blood on them, and Wyatt says the epic line, "Are you gonna do something or just stand there and bleed?" Which might be the hardest fucking line of all time. I don't know though. Wyatt proceeds to grab the man by the ear and pull him to the door and push him onto the street and tells him to never come back there ever again. As Wyatt leaves to meet with his brothers, they begin talking while strutting through the town. We see a cut to Johnny after Wyatt threw him out, and he's brandishing a shotgun and beginning to take aim at Wyatt as he walks with his brothers. But just as he raises the gun, a voice calls out. It's Doc Holliday, and Johnny is taken aback to see that Doc is back in town. Doc and the Earp brothers proceed to ignore this defeated fuck who is still standing there holding the shotgun as they greet each other because they're all old friends, basically. And Johnny realizes that it's the legendary Wyatt Earp that just threw him out of that place. The four of them talk about gambling briefly, and then Doc turns to Johnny and he tells him he forgot he was there and tells him he can go now. And Johnny just walks away in disgrace, and it is fucking great. Behan walks up and asks the brothers how they like the town and begins boasting about how nice the town is and how legitimate it's becoming. Right on cue, a group of men stumble out of a saloon, and one shoots the other, and Doc makes a wisecrack about how civilized it really is there. Two surviving men recover from the tussle, and they look over and recognize Wyatt and Doc and walk over to talk to them. They are named Turkey Creek Jack Johnson and Texas Jack Vermillion, if you can fucking believe that. Marshal Fred stops to confiscate the men's weapons and arrest them, despite them claiming it was a legal shooting that they done. Oh right, in what is always a weird sight, fucking Billy Zane is in this movie as Mr. Fabian. He pulls up and helps a woman named Josephine Marcus off a carriage. Josephine is honestly pretty hot by early 90s Western standards, if you know what I mean. Then it cuts to some kind of performance hall type place where they do shows for the entertainment of folks around those parts. We see the Cowboys members from the beginning, like Curly and Johnny Ringo, roughhousing downstairs, and Wyatt and Maddie are getting settled upstairs in the balcony. Doc and his girlfriend Kate show up to join them, and the mayor introduces himself to Wyatt, who quickly dismisses him before he can presumably ask him to come out of retirement and be a lawman again. As the acts go up on stage, the Cowboys downstairs shout out in the middle of the show, and one even fires a gun at the first performer and forces him off stage. The next performer is Mr. Fabian, who they allow to perform a bit more, and he's a better sport about the disruptions and gunshots, and they actually seem to like him by the end, which is weird because, like I said, it's fucking Billy Zane. As the next performance starts, the disruptions continue, and it's obvious Wyatt and Doc are becoming irritated with the rude cowboy members downstairs, but it's not really bad enough for them to actually do anything about it. It's revealed that one of the masked performers is the lovely Josephine, as she removes her mask while they take their bows at the end of the show. When Wyatt sees her face, he's astounded by the reveal, but it's not really clear if he actually knows her from earlier in his life or if he just has the hots for her. But Maddie is like literally right there and kind of pretends that she just doesn't see it. As the Earp brothers leave the show and they get to talking about God and whatnot, and it's clear that Morgan is much more spiritual than his brothers, who are clearly not as convinced by all that stuff. The three couples go to part ways, and Wyatt tells Maddie that he has to go to work, which I guess means going to gamble, but it's clear that she wants him to stay with her, but he fucks that all up by waiting too long to reconsider what he's decided his plans are. Then she gets more pissed at him when he sees the bottle of laudanum that she has from earlier, and he tells her that she might want to see a doctor. But she claims it's just headaches, but it's pretty clear that this is all groundwork being laid so that we can dislike Maddie's attitude enough in case something happens with Wyatt and Josephine later. It cuts to Wyatt, Morgan, and Doc gambling, and Wyatt is winning a bunch. Doc is asking him if he considers himself a truly married man or not, and Wyatt explains that neither he nor Maddie were angels when they first met, and just suggests that they've grown up a lot, but Wyatt is basically just doing everything other than actually answering the question. Then Doc asks what Wyatt would do if Josephine showed up there, and Wyatt claims he'd just ignore her and not really care. Naturally, she is there, and Doc knew that, and Wyatt does his best to not pay much attention to her, but it isn't exactly a convincing performance. Honestly, this next scene is fucking perfect and iconic, and I love it. So, as Wyatt sits at a card table and is asked for an autograph, Curly shows up with Ringo and interrupts to confront Wyatt and challenge him. One of Curly's men, named Ike, bullies Wyatt by calling him a lawman and claims the law don't go around there. But Wyatt tells him that he's retired, and Curly seems somewhat satisfied to hear that. Ringo recognizes Doc and asks him if he's retired too, and then Doc unseriously says, "Oh no, not me. I'm in my prime," as he is clearly ill and overly sweaty. And Doc actually recognizes Ringo too and mocks him by telling his girlfriend Kate who Ringo is and jokingly says that he thinks he might hate him. Then the two of them, Ringo and Doc, start speaking in Latin, and I'll tell you later what they say in English, and that'll just be my little treat for you later. Ringo makes a show of twirling his gun around threateningly, and Doc mocks him by imitating him with a metal mug. Curly and Ringo eventually walk away as Doc has won over the crowd with his antics, and we see Josephine asking Behan who Wyatt Earp is, and she seems rather impressed by him and probably wants to fuck him something fierce. Behan kind of bursts her bubble by saying he's actually taken. Then it cuts to the next day, and Wyatt is out riding and sees Josephine out riding as well, and they talk and play around on their horses, and they even have a little race. They're being flirty as fuck, of course, because they both want to do each other real bad. When they finally stop and talk some more, she acts surprised to see that he's not dead serious all the time. She asks him if he's happy, and he gets super defensive about it and pretends like he is actually happy. She asks if Maddie is his wife, and she is very direct, asking about what he wants out of life, but she doesn't believe settling down really suits him. And he asks her why she's with fucking Billy Zane, which is honestly something that happens a lot with the significant others of his characters. She explains that she doesn't care about being a lady and wants to have fun and live off room service, and he tells her that she's definitely different. Then it cuts to Wyatt returning home to find Maddie with a new bottle of opium, and you're like, oh shit, this is completely shocking, and I had no idea that this behavior might continue or get worse or come up later at all. This is a very awkward interaction as Maddie is high as a kite and in pain still, and she's a little irritated with Wyatt. Wyatt asks Maddie if she'd ever like to do any of what Josephine was talking about liking to do, without telling her why he's asking or where he thought of it from, and Maddie sounds confused and not at all into it. Then it cuts to a gambling hall where Doc is playing a sad, slow Chopin song on the piano, and a man named Billy questions why Kate would be with Doc and criticizes his choice of music. Billy is played by Thomas Hayden Church, by the way. Suddenly, it cuts to Curly waking up high or drunk and talking about how great he feels Then he menacingly walks outside and fires shots in the middle of town that could have hit literally anyone. Behan comes and tries to get the marshal to help out because he thinks someone should stop Curly since someone could get hurt out there. Wyatt suggests to the marshal that he leave the situation be, but the marshal insists that he really has to do something. And it's one of those painful bits of foreshadowing that the marshal is about to die. To anyone who's ever seen a movie before, it's pretty obvious. When the marshal confronts Curly, he asks him to surrender his guns, and Curly pretends like he's only joking around and acts like he's going to give them up, but obviously it's not going to go that easy. As the marshal goes to take the guns, Curly shoots him dead in the street, and Curly pretends almost like it was accidental and asks the dead marshal if he's alright, like he's trying to preserve public perception of his innocence. But Wyatt swiftly comes out and knocks Curly the fuck out. Bystanders gather around in horror as they realize what has happened, and Wyatt tries to defuse the situation. The citizens want Curly hanged, but Wyatt insists that he get a trial. But then a gang of cowboys led by Ike and Billy surround Wyatt and tell him to cut Curly loose. But Wyatt points his gun at Ike's head. He ruthlessly tells Ike that he will kill Ike even if it means the rest of them kill him immediately afterward, because Wyatt don't play that shit. Doc comes and pulls his gun on Billy and tells him he'll die right after Ike, and Billy tells Doc he's too drunk and pulls a giant fucking knife on him. The cowboys decide to leave, but not without making it clear that they'll be back, and it's like, yeah, guys, we know this can't possibly be the end of this, and you live in this town. Honestly, I don't think anyone could have done this part better than Kurt Russell. He is fucking phenomenal in this flick, and frankly, pretty fucking badass. Wyatt leaves to take Curly to jail, and tensions are very high. The next day, Wyatt is explaining to his brothers what happened when he brought Curly to the jail. He was told that because Wyatt didn't actually see Curly murder the marshal, there is no case because you can't have a murder without witnesses, which is true. Every single murder ever committed has been witnessed by a third party, otherwise, it just didn't count. Wyatt starts talking about other things like making money, and it seems like Virgil is still somehow very distraught about the whole Curly getting away with murdering a marshal situation. And then the mayor comes again to ask Wyatt to see if he'll become marshal, and the three brothers turn him down, but not without the mayor getting a quick guilt trip in before leaving, because it's pretty clear that they're among the few men left who would be up to the task, and without someone to lay down the law, the town is kind of fucked. But also, you named a town Tombstone and acted like that didn't have negative connotations. Virgil leaves, and without it explicitly being said, after looking at his wife, he becomes marshal and promptly bans having weapons in town. Wyatt is pissed that Virgil didn't stay out of it, and then is even more pissed when Morgan also became his deputy. Wyatt just tells them that they're making a big mistake and storms off in irritation because he knows he's probably going to have to cave and join them pretty soon, but he knows all of the risks involved in that. Later at the gambling hall, Morgan pleads with Wyatt to intervene because Doc has been up drinking and gambling for 36 hours. Doc beats Ike for like the 12th straight hand, and Ike assumes Doc is cheating, and tensions get high as he makes a big stink about it and even threatens Virgil. It's clear Doc's tuberculosis is getting really bad as he coughs and collapses from his chair. Then Ike angrily gets his weapons from the bartender and makes threatening comments about the Earps without realizing that Virgil is standing between him and the door, and he pulls his gun on Ike and says he can have his weapons back when he gets sober. Tempers flare from the cowboys as they feel Virgil is overstepping his authority, and they make it clear that some shit's gonna go down in due time. The doctor tells Doc, who is laying sick in bed, that his lungs are severely damaged and that he has at most 2 years left to live if he stops with his reckless lifestyle. But the doctor also says that the amount of time that he has could also be 2 days because shit, it's the 1800s and who the fuck knows. The Earps watch as 6 cowboys come into town, and Wyatt has Virgil swear him in as a member of law enforcement. Virgil wants to confront the cowboys for carrying weapons, but Wyatt tries to caution him since the weapons are a small offense and that it could have a ripple effect if he does anything too drastic. But Virgil remains firm in his stance. Wyatt also offends Doc by saying it's not really his fight and he doesn't really need to get involved. But Wyatt really changes his tune when it's clear that all 3 other men are against him, and they all begin to move toward the cowboys to confront them. I also like that he refers to Doc's shotgun as a street howitzer. I don't know why, that's just a cool name for it. Behan tries to convince the lawmen that he disarmed the cowboys, but it's clear he's just trying to prevent an ugly confrontation. But the Earps and Doc are just not backing down in this situation. By the way, this pivotal scene is known as the showdown at the OK Corral. When Virgil announces he's there to disarm the cowboys and tells them to put up their hands, they don't comply and only reach for their guns. Wyatt realizes Ike and the cowboys intend to fire at them without surrendering, and a gunfight immediately ensues, and Ike pleads that he has no gun. They tell him to get away because the fight has begun, and he stumbles into the building where Behan is hiding, like a real bitch ass, and Ike steals Behan's gun. I want to be clear, the Earps and Doc are easily winning this fight, but this is basically the Cowboys B squad, and this is only the halfway point of the movie. It's not the climax. Despite Morgan taking a shot, the lawmen are victorious, but Behan tells them they are all under arrest because he's a piece of shit coward. But Ike escapes unscathed from this whole interaction. And of course, Wyatt's like, fuck you, bro. I'm not letting this shit happen. It's clear that although their intention was to put an end to the turmoil from the Cowboys, they have only increased tensions, and the Cowboys will want revenge for this. A funeral held for the Cowboys by the other Cowboys proceeds through town, and it's clear that this is really just the beginning. As the Earps walk through town, they are met with indifference by the citizens and are confronted by a threatening Ringo who says he wants their blood for what they did, but not like as a Red Cross donation. Wyatt tries to dismiss Ringo, but he's drunk and insists on a confrontation to which only Doc is willing to partake. But Curly and company intervene to tell Ringo it's not the right time and they pull him away. That night, Behan comes to confront Josephine about her obvious involvement with Wyatt, and Behan claims that only one man will be in charge of Tombstone soon, and I guess he thinks that's him? I don't know. Or maybe he means Curly or somebody like that. Across town, the Earps are getting close to ready for bed, and an unknown man suspiciously watches them and sees Virgil leaving to go home. Josephine comes to warn the Earp girls that something bad is about to happen, and when they think it's Virgil arriving, it's the suspicious man, and he fires a shotgun at them and flees without killing or hurting them, but it scares the bejesus out of them. Virgil quietly comes back to his brothers, and it's revealed that he's been shot as he collapses to the floor. They mention they can't believe the unprecedented nature of attacking wives or family, even by outlaws, and Morgan is frustrated by how much of a stubborn bitch Wyatt is seemingly being. But in reality, he's being adult and sensible because he knows it's a dangerous situation. Virgil learns he will lose the use of one of his arms and is in bad shape and is too angry with Wyatt to even talk to him. As Wyatt leaves, 3 members of the Cowboys approach them and claim they don't agree with what was done to the Earp family and claim that they are leaving the gang and will support the Earps. But honestly, the leader of the 3 in the group is Michael Rooker, so it doesn't feel super safe to trust him a bunch. His character's name is Sherman McMasters. The storm going on in these scenes, in addition to the amazing score, really sets the tone well. Suddenly, we see Morgan shooting pool only to suddenly be shot by an unknown assailant from outside. There is yet another gruesome scene as they extract the bullet from Morgan, and he begins bleeding all over. Morgan painfully lays there dying and tells Wyatt he was right about how they should have been cautious because it seems like he got pretty bad here. Wyatt watches his brother die and still has his blood on his hands as he walks out into the pouring rain. Josephine tries to approach him and he basically tells her to get, and Maddie witnesses the interaction and realizes firsthand that something has been going on between them, and shockingly, that's pretty much the end of Maddie's presence in the story. I don't know who could have seen that coming. At Morgan's funeral, Wyatt is hauling away Morgan's casket and stops by where Curly and Ringo are sitting to tell them that it's over. Curly just says, well, and Ringo says it smells like someone died, which is just a disrespectful thing to say, of course. And after Wyatt and Virgil angrily ride away, Curly tells Ike to finish them off. Ike and Frank Stillwell watch Virgil leaving on the train with the intention of Ike just shooting Virgil while he's sitting on the train, and suddenly Wyatt shoots Ike's accomplice, Frank, dead on the platform. Wyatt puts a single finger up to Virgil, who looks at him and gives an understanding wave, like, thanks, bruh, we good now. Doc and the three defected former cowboys approach wearing badges. Wyatt points his gun down at Ike and shows him that he's the marshal now by flashing his badge, and he wants Ike to tell his friends that he'll kill any man he sees wearing a red sash. Wyatt drops another badass line by saying to Ike to tell them he's coming and that hell's coming with him. The score gets significantly more intense as the five lawmen go on a rampage, killing various cowboys in town. A montage of Wyatt and his men carrying out the killings of cowboys ensues, showcasing how relentless Wyatt is being with the gang members. During a shootout with Curly and his crew, Wyatt recklessly rushes out with his gun drawn and kills Curly out in the open, despite great risk because all of the members of these two sides are like shooting at each other, and Wyatt is just standing out in the open like this. Afterwards, Sherman warns Doc that Ringo will soon be after them to avenge Curly. Doc asserts that Wyatt is more likely after a complete reckoning than simple revenge. In town, Josephine confronts Behan and the Cowboys with the fact that the Cowboys killed Billy Zane's character, Mr. Fabian, while attempting to rob them. Josephine is, of course, racked with grief and can't understand all the senseless violence. The five lawmen watch as Ringo rounds up about 30 men and they decide they need a place to regroup. Doc is spitting up blood and falls off his horse, and a farmer takes the group in to give them safe haven. Josephine stops at the farm and Wyatt sees her. The two of them talk, but he can't convince her not to go as she looks at him sadly as her carriage takes off. Later, one of the cowboys hauls McMasters' body, all bloody and torn and fucked up looking, and leaves him there and shouts a message to Wyatt as he rides away. The writer claims Ringo wants to settle their dispute one-on-one in Oak Grove, and Wyatt angrily shouts that he'll be there. When the writer comes back to Ringo, Ringo instructs him to kill the rest of the lawmen after he kills Wyatt, and the writer says Wyatt won't even come, despite having no reason to believe that, because Wyatt didn't really express any hesitation or doubt that he would come. Wyatt talks with Doc, who is laying in bed, and Doc explains that Ringo is the kind of guy who can never steal enough or inflict enough pain, ever really be satisfied. Doc theorizes that Ringo wants revenge for simply being born. Wyatt confirms with Doc that it's not likely he can beat Ringo, and although Doc tries to go with Wyatt, he really doesn't have the strength. Wyatt gives Doc a deputy badge before riding off. Three remaining lawmen come, and one of the cowboys tells Wyatt that Ringo is waiting for him down the way. Ringo sees the shadow of who he believes is Wyatt approaching, but is surprised to see that it's Doc instead. Doc says the line, "I'm your Huckleberry," and basically tells Ringo he wants to finally have the showdown with each other that they had talked about previously. But Ringo is seemingly hesitant about this and claims that he was just fooling when they were talking, and Doc says that he wasn't fooling about it at all. The two men circle each other, and Doc tells Ringo to say when, and Ringo attempts to surprise Doc, but Doc beats him to the punch by shooting him dead. Wyatt walks up, surprised to see Doc, and Doc tells him that he wasn't as sick as he made himself out to be. And honestly, what's wild about this movie is the two main villains meet their demise. It's such a weird time, and it's I wouldn't say anticlimactic. It's just not full of a bunch of Hollywood tropes where it's like a big showdown and everybody's around watching and stuff. It's like largely these two deaths of these main villains occur very separate from each other and very differently from what you would expect. It's not like a huge stopping point, especially with Curly dying. It's like Curly dies and Wyatt is still rampaging right after that. Wyatt and Doc decide to finish off the rest of the cowboys and proceed to go on another killing rampage, taking out one gang member at a time. They chase down Ike on his horse, but they let him run away, which is deeply unsatisfying because Ike is the kind of dude you want to see die real bad. And confusingly, Doc and Wyatt shake hands while still riding full speed. Don't really get that. Weird choice by the filmmakers. It cuts to a sanitarium in Colorado where Doc is laying dying sometime after this rampage. Doc says some very heartfelt words to Wyatt after telling him he doesn't want to play cards and he doesn't want Wyatt to keep coming to see him there. Basically, Doc is in too bad of shape for his friend to see him like this. He tells him to go find Josephine and make her his own. Finally, Doc begs him to leave, and Wyatt begrudgingly does, with deep pain in his eyes. Wyatt goes and surprises Josephine backstage at a show and puts his heart on the line, and she's like, "Yeah, I guess." And they go out and dance in the light snowfall. The narrator from the beginning comes back in and explains how the power of the cowboy gang had been broken forever by Wyatt Earp and his men. Ike was apparently killed in an attempted robbery sometime later. Maddie died of an overdose shortly after leaving Tombstone. Virgil and Allie moved to California and he became a town sheriff, despite only having the use of one arm. Wyatt and Josephine stayed together for 47 years and never split up. Wyatt wound up dying in LA in 1929, and among the pallbearers at his funeral were early film stars William S. Hart and Tom Mix. Tom Mix wept over the loss of the legendary hero. And we roll credits. All right, on to trivia for this movie. According to Val Kilmer, screenwriter Kevin Jarre insisted the actors wear real wool costumes in accordance with the time period. In the birdcage theater scene, Kilmer says a thermometer on set read 134 degrees Fahrenheit. Kilmer suggested jokingly that was the reason Doc Holliday killed so many people. It's just like he wore wool in the summer in the Arizona territory, and that made him mad. Some years after the death of Doc Holliday, Wyatt was quoted in an interview as saying Doc was a dentist, not a lawman or an assassin, whom necessity had made a gambler, a gentleman whom disease had made a frontier vagabond, a philosopher whom life had made a caustic wit, a long, lean, ash blonde fellow, nearly dead with consumption, and at the same time, the most skillful gambler and the nerviest, speediest, deadliest man with a six gun that I ever knew. As I mentioned, Wyatt Earp died in 1929, having never been so much as scratched by a single bullet. The fact that his name is known above, for instance, Virgil's, the Marshal of Tombstone at the time of the famous gunfight, is largely due to Wyatt's self promotion. Before his death, he walked in Hollywood circles, and John Wayne once claimed to have met him, apparently modeling his famous walk on that of Wyatt Earp. Val Kilmer practiced for a long time on his quick draw speed and gave his character a Southern aristocrat accent. The Southern accent is an authentic touch, as Holliday was a cousin, several generations removed, of Margaret Mitchell, author of Gone with the Wind. In 2020, Val Kilmer put an end to the long-standing Huckleberry Hucklebearer debate. He claims that the line really was written as "I'm your Huckleberry" in the script, meaning "I'm your man, you've met your match." Kilmer set the record straight in his autobiography as well, which was entitled aptly enough, "I'm Your Huckleberry." And Doc Holliday's line, "I'm your Huckleberry," is authentic 19th century slang, meaning "I'm up to the task at hand" or "I'm the right man for the job." It is well attested in primary source documents from the Civil War era, more than 10 years before Mark Twain's character Huckleberry Finn first appeared in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer from 1876. The expression is not a reference to Twain's writings. And I also really didn't even know that the Huckleberry Hucklebearer debate was a thing. I had never heard in my mind anything other than Huckleberry, and I just assumed it was a thing they said, but apparently there's a lot of debate about it. Wyatt Earp became a consultant to the motion picture industry, advising on westerns after he moved to Hollywood in 1915. He frequently visited the sets of several silent films directed by John Ford and starring actor Harry Carey. In the movie Tombstone, the role of Marshal Fred White was played by Harry Carey Jr. The cowboy firing the pistol at the camera in the beginning credits of this film is actually from the final scene of the 1903 short The Great Train Robbery, a film by the Edison Company. The scene frightened audience members who believed that they were about to be shot. The actor is unknown. Here is the translation of what Doc and Johnny Ringo are saying to one another in Latin. Doc Holliday, in vino veritas. I'm going to try my best to pronounce these right. That means, in wine there is truth, implying that he has been drinking, but he is not lying about what he feels. Johnny Ringo, age quod agis, do what you do, like go ahead and drink and be a dick. Doc Holliday, credat Judaeus, Pella, non ego, let Apella the Jew believe, not I. Johnny Ringo, Juventus stultorum magister, youth is the teacher of fools, basically suggesting Doc doesn't realize who he's dealing with and is about to learn. Doc Holliday, in pace requiescat, rest in peace. The line, credat Judaeus appella non ego, let Apella the Jew believe, not I, was confusing to viewers. Scholarly papers showed that Romans used the phrase to show contempt for Judaism's belief that divine power was involved in everyday life. Harry Carey Jr. was actually 72 when he played Marshal Fred White, who is believed to have died at either 30 or 31, which is a ripe old age for a lawman in the Old West, by the way. During the famous gunfight, members of the two opposing parties were initially only about 6 feet apart, and about 30 shots were fired in 30 seconds. Michael Biehn stated on the podcast Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum that he barely said 5 words to director George P. Cosmatos on set. The reason for this animosity was that, according to Biehn, Cosmatos treated extras and people he saw as beneath him with utter contempt, whilst also sucking up to anyone above him. Many scenes and subplots cut from the film did still not make the expanded DVD version. One sequence was the Cowboys' bonfire rally and mourning scene, which takes place the night they buried the OK Corral dead. A brief shot can be seen in some of the trailers, Curly Bill throwing a bottle of whiskey into the bonfire. Kevin Jaré's original script for this movie was significantly longer than the final film. It was intended to be an epic, detailing the lives of all of the combatant parties in the story. After Jarre was fired as director, George P. Cosmatos hired John Fasano to trim the script to focus primarily on the Earp family to make the already delayed shoot more manageable. Fasano received co-author credit in early promotional materials, but his name was removed from the film's credits, probably due to Writers Guild arbitration. Instead, Fasano was given an associate producer credit. All right, on to info and ratings. Opening weekend, 6.5 million. Worldwide gross, 56 million. IMDb rating, 7.8. Letterboxd rating, 3.9. Rotten Tomato critics score, 76%. Rotten Tomato audience score, 93%. Personal rating, 5 out of 5 stars. Praise for this movie. This is the best and easily my favorite of all modern westerns. I would say there are a couple of older westerns that I do like more. The delightful and relatable characters take the whole movie up at least a few notches. The story is well concocted and delivers on showing what a dark time this was. For criticism, I can't help but notice our heroes don't have a showdown with a giant mechanical spider at the end of this film, and that's a real shame. Alright, everyone, thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.
I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Review. A method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews. What you hoped you would see is half blind with hats tied, with all the dates of release for Footloose, The Dark Knight, a Kurt Russell brain freeze, Rear Windows and Gaslights. I'm Billy and your Meg, Sharon Stone, the leg spread. The park starts with the eggs, it won't stop till you're dead. I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Reviews. No method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews.